Hey everybody, welcome. We have another talk today. We are chatting to Nico, who is coming all the way from Berlin, and he's not actually from Berlin. Nico, could you introduce
Mhm.
yourself? Tell us where you're from and how you ended up there.
Yeah, my name is Nico Lee Lazarus. I'm a concept artist, but I was born in South Africa, Johannesburg. Um, and yeah, worked in the industry for 4 years there, and found a company that I really liked, and found them at some international convention,
Mm-hmm.
and they were doing recruiting there, and passed on my portfolio, and met the team, and then got the art test, and then a couple of months later got flown over. So
Jeez, man, that's so
it was
crazy.
crazy.
That
Yeah, it
is,
was crazy.
that's so crazy. And I know that there's probably a lot of history that led up to that point, which we're going to dig into today. So let's
Yeah, we
start.
will.
Let's actually go way back. Can you tell me about like as early as you can remember, like what really got you into the passion for art?
Sure. I mean, as far as I could remember, I was drawing. But I think I really got my start like I have an uncle who's a graphic, and so he was always doing creative things around the house and drawing, and so I think like I would just sit with him and also just have my stack of paper and just going at it. And then he noticed the interest, and then as I went, he showed me a few things like a little bit of the basics of lighting and form, and I developed a very young interest
Hmm.
into art. And then I think I was around 9, and I saw the making of Lion King, and they
Okay.
showed the animators doing their flipping, and they brought lions into the studio, uh, and ever since then I knew that I wanted to be in the art industry. Just at that time I thought I wanted to be an animator.
Yeah.
uh, and I had no idea about concept art or anything, and then just carried on, and then after school went to university, and the only animation course that had a degree at the time was postgrad, so I needed to do 2 years of fine art. Uh, and while I was doing that, Feng Zhu released his design cinema,
Okay.
and I think
Mm-hmm.
he was on episode 4 or something. And I was like,
Mm.
concept art, like, what is this thing? And I realized that that's what I was doing in my spare time. I was doing turnarounds of characters, uh, and then so yeah, I decided to leave university, and then uh, done it on my own, and
Okay.
then just followed, started getting stuff off YouTube. And then I worked as a graphic designer for 4 years. And then I got contacted by a local mobile game studio
Mm.
in Joburg. And
Mm-hmm.
then that was my start. So in 2014 was my first concept art gig.
Amazing. So you went into concept art through graphic design. How did that even work? Did you have just a body of work that you had been drawing up until that point?
Yeah, so I mean, I was doing, sort of the daily grind, and then just posting on social media. And then there were some local conventions that were happening, and I found out about Artist Alley. Uh, I went to Rage convention
Mm-hmm.
in Joburg, and it's actually a gaming convention. So I actually went for the games, but they had an Artist Alley, and I wandered in there, and I was like, "What is this?" And they told me all about it. So the next day I prepared, and I went for the convention, and I met quite a few artists, and then we stayed in contact. And then one of my friends that I met there, she was like, "Hey, like my boyfriend works at the studio. They're looking for concept artists." So I showed him your stuff, uh, and then he contacted me, and we spoke. It's like, "Yeah, I'll let you know as soon as we have an opening." And it was kind of a sad thing, because then I went 6 months without hearing anything. And I was like, this guy was just talking. But I continued to hustle and grow, or try to grow. And then at some point he messaged me, and he's like, "Hey, we got a position. Are you in?" And it was like, yeah, hell's yes.
Strap up.
Yeah, let's go.
That's
Uh,
amazing, man. So when you got inside that studio, do you think that there was a massive jump in your training? at that point?
Yes, the learning curve was steep. Well, number one, because it was a full production team, and so I was the only concept artist. So the first thing I had to do was like design a boss, and I designed him, and the guys were like, "Oh yeah, this is just way too expensive." I was like,
"What do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean?
I just
like,
got
money?
here."
And polygon count and optimization, and then having to work with animators and riggers, and so I was designing creatures, and they were like, "Dude, like this won't be able to animate without clipping," and so I learned a lot about production. It was my introduction to 3D. It was crazy. It was crazy, man, but fun.
Awesome. When you say clipping, I think of like some of the early stuff I did where I had like a giant shoulder pad on a character, and the guy came up to me and was like, "How is he going to lift his arms?" Because it's like it just can't work.
Yeah, and like once you learn all of those things, like then you start looking at other designs around, like online, and you're like, "Oh, that won't work. Oh, that won't work." Yeah, but like before then, like. I think it's just very interesting. Like there's like art, and then there's like a production work, and like designing for games is very different. And it's like it was interesting. It was awesome.
So, I mean, getting started into video games is such a nice way of like kind of getting into concept art, because it really is quite raw. There's not a lot of story driven stuff. It's really just the art itself, and then it's like, how do I make it functional, and then how do I make it look good? So it's pure design. Yeah. So when you got started out, like, I mean, you said you were basically self-taught from a young age, and then you did all this other fine art and things like that. So you did pick up some skills through a sort of, let's call it tertiary education. Is that something that you would recommend, or do you feel like being self-taught nowadays is a viable option? And perhaps maybe, what do you think of education right now is what I'm asking you.
So I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack there, right? And so one of the things that I will like to mention is that, like, it takes a certain type of person, so some people have the discipline required to sit down on their own and, grind and create a structured system where they creating and learning and growing. Other people need to be within a structure. They need external motivation or people chasing them. So it's good to, like, so with schools, you get like peer groups, you get lecturers to assist in, like, if you don't understand something, you have someone to ask. But I think right now, the fees for colleges have become like ridiculous, especially the ones that are really good. People are coming out with debt, and like they spend years paying that debt off. And so I think there was a need for that, and there was this uprise in online education, and so people giving out like amazing resources at really affordable prices. So I think a lot of people now can do it on their own. But like I say, you really need to understand like what you can do and who you are, and are you disciplined enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
And basically what you also need for yourself, right? So you can supplement the community that you get in a college by finding some online communities or local communities. But so I think the days of schools, I wonder, I see them at some point possibly being obsolete, unless it's someplace like, like a art center or something where the actual connection with the lecturers and the networking that you'll get beyond that is part of the package. So the people you meet there will go on to work, and they'll become your network, for the future.
Absolutely.
And that's also something that's really valuable.
Yeah. It's really interesting that
Yep.
you mentioned self-discipline when it comes to learning on your own. Um, when you first got into a studio, did you notice, did you hit that wall where you realize I'm no longer drawing necessarily for fun? This is now a job. And if someone gives me something that I don't necessarily want to draw, I still have to do it anyway. And I chat to a lot of young artists who get this impression of like, I don't want to apply at that studio because they might give me something that I don't like doing. Right? And I really like doing this one thing. And what do you think about that?
I think it's well for me it was slightly different, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
like at the time I was at an advertising agency, and I mean the team was great, but the work was grating. And like, you know, working with those types of clients and you know, it's a different thing. And I think mine was out of desperation. Like I just really wanted to shift into the industry at that point. And so I just wanted to be in the industry. And I think now I think people more or less know what they want, but unfortunately, a lot of the times it's what a lot of other people want. So it's like, I only want to work at Blizzard, or I want to work at Riot, or I want to
Mm-hmm.
work at Naughty Dog. You know, it's whatever's popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's fine. I think people need to manage their expectations about that, because if Blizzard says they're hiring, you know, they get thousands of applicants. They basically can pick and choose. So you have to be cream of the crop,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's fine to want to work in a specific place. I think it's just to manage your own expectations. It's if you want to be in the industry, there's a lot of easier ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the barrier of entry is a little bit lower in, you know, smaller studios, in mobile game studios. So, and being in one of those studios, you'll grow way faster. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so many times you hear that story of, you know, like I learned more in 3 months at this company than I did in my whole degree.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because it's just the practical application at work
Yeah.
is
The
just
deliberate practice every day.
yeah. And it's like, you know, there's no fluff. You cut off the fluff, because
Yeah.
then it's just like,
It's
okay,
the
we
raw.
just want
Mm-hmm.
this, and you're like, oh, but what about, you know, like, you know, nice presentations and stuff. And they're like, no, we don't care, like, you know, just we just need to have a clear design, you know.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, cool. And it's like I've seen that at colleges they dedicate like 2 weeks on, like, you know, how to present work on a sheet, in a portfolio. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure it's clear, and whoever you pass your work to doesn't have to ask you questions about it, and you're good.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you know, there's
Absolutely.
um so yeah, it's so much uh more productive and conducive to growth being within any studio.
Yeah.
um
So do you think there's a disconnect between, say, college systems that we have going on today, universities and things like that, and the industry in terms of things like presentation, things like what skills you actually need, what is useful, what is fluff?
yes, I think one of the problems that I've seen in my personal experience
Mm-hmm.
was that there's not enough uh, lecturers that have industry experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I never want to deter anyone from going to any college, right? But what I will do is always say, like, think about where you want to work, look at the artists that are there, and then look at the colleges, and then look at the lecturers' work, right?
Yeah.
And then you can realistically gauge, like, you know, what you're going to be learning, because they can probably teach you theoretical knowledge and give you the basis of software and get you into everything, but there's a limitation that, like, they won't be able to practically show you certain things if they've never done it, if their skill level is not at that level. So it does create a crazy disconnect. And it's like, uh, you know, they hire graduates to
Mm-hmm.
teach.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the thing just gets cycled, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very difficult to create like a really uh, a powerful industry that way.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
get a lot of people coming out there and not really knowing what to expect or how to participate
Or
in industry.
or struggle to hit the bar right out of college.
Yeah,
And that's a
yeah,
tragedy.
and that's the thing. They also come up with an inflated idea. Like, I got the degree,
Yes.
which means I'm ready to
Yes.
participate in industry. And then when they apply and they, you know, you have to turn them down.
Yeah,
That's
I'm actually
it's
super
really
interested
difficult.
in asking you about this because currently you're working in a studio that has a lot of this coming in. I mean, it's a very popular place; like people want to work there. Can you tell us what it's like when you see applicants apply based on something like just a degree rather than the whole package?
So you mean at Sixma Vodka?
Sure, I'm sure you have applicants like that, right?
Yes. Wait, sorry, you kind of broke up. So if they
Mm.
apply with a degree,
Yeah, so like for example, someone just applies with a degree thinking that okay, that's going to get me an internship. What do you think it actually takes?
so the thing is, like, if you don't have the skills, then the degree is meaningless anyway, right? I think the degree opens up doors in terms of possibly like travel, and it makes things like business visas easier. But what we've always seen is that we don't actually care about your qualifications. It's all about your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing would be, uh, you know, who you are. Can you participate? Are you a team player? um, you know, like the degree, like I don't have any qualifications, um, and back home I managed to get into art directing at the mobile game studio. So in my fourth year I was the art director,
Yeah.
and so we had a lot of people come in and, you know, just get turned down. And we had a grade 10 student once come in, like he needed to do some vac work for his school,
Mm-hmm.
and he already was a functioning 3D modeler. And so we gave him some tasks and he killed it.
Yeah.
And then my boss was like, well, if you have holidays and you want to come in and earn some cash,
Yeah.
you know, you can come in and do some work for us, you know.
Absolutely.
And like, he was a grade 10 student,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Well, there you go. It wasn't even finished studying. It's like,
yeah, the thing is, like, I think skills and are always wanted anywhere, right?
yeah.
And I've never seen someone be like, oh, this guy is so talented, but he doesn't have a degree. Shit,
Yeah.
we can't hire
Absolutely.
him, you know?
So
Like,
I actually want to ask you about the skill aspect now, because I know that you've been on a very interesting journey from going from an art director position back home to wanting something more for yourself, wanting to expand your career. And I don't think it was, I'm going to ask you now, was it a smooth transition, or did you find out that you had to put in way more than you thought to even just be noticed? Like what kind of journey did you go on there?
I think coming from SA, right? I never felt like I deserved the art director gig. Like, you know, I was like looking at art directors like from other big companies, and I was like, clearly there's a skill gap here, right? But I think it was in SA at the time where uh, I was the best suited for that job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a big fish, small pond situation.
Yeah.
Um, and then so when I came over, Sixma Vodka was like, oh, dude, like, but from your skill level, we're gonna have to bring you in as a junior. And I was like, uh, okay. But then I had this idea of, you know, I'll go in and then just show my skills and then climb the ladder, you know. And then I got here, and then it was like, oh wait, yeah, okay, I'm a junior, you know. And it was like, it was a bit of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And it's like the people who are seniors at the studio, like the gap is quite large. It's immense.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I don't think I would have ever been able to gauge that distance just
Mm-hmm.
by seeing their artwork. You know,
Yeah.
it took me to be working with them to really see like, okay, how they solve the problems, how quickly they do it, how proficient they are.
Yes.
You know, I think, you know, a lot of people could paint like beautiful pieces of work with enough time and enough reference, right? But then as soon as you put a deadline on it, then it's like, you know,
Oh dear.
what can you do in 8 hours? You know, then
Exactly.
that's a very different, it's a very different ball game.
Yeah.
So
Have you noticed that when you start doing something new that's completely out of your comfort zone, it tends to take a huge chunk of time? And then the better you get at it, it almost as if that chunk kind of like it has bigger chunks come out of it in terms of like being able to get closer to that deadline.
yeah, I mean, I thought I was fairly clued up on like fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was the thing coming here. There's there's nuance to the fundamentals, and the nuance is huge, right? And I think that's the difference between like, uh, you know, a really good artist and a pro,
Oh,
you
yes.
know,
Mm.
or a pro and an expert. Let's put
Yeah.
it like that.
Yeah. Even
You
the
know,
thinking process about that specific moment when you're working on something and someone with incredible ability comes by and says like, have you thought of it like this? And it's like,
yeah, yeah. It's that's my everyday at the at the studio, you know. But it's also one of the best um, feelings, you know, to be learning constantly, you know.
yeah.
So
And I mean,
it yeah.
yeah. So I was going to say for anybody at home who has no idea how high the caliber of work at Six More Vodka is, I encourage you to go look it up. And then if you don't cry into your hands, there's something abnormal with you. And then I would say, I look at Nico's work and I'm just like, I recognize how good he is. And for him to say all of this stuff is like, it's shocking to me, quite honestly. But I do understand. And I'm sure someday I might see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, it's just what it's like. Basically, like, you know, you think you basically they expanded my world, and now there's just so much more to explore, you
Yeah.
know.
And it's not enough that, you know, you moved country. So now you get to explore a completely different country at the same time.
Well, it opens up all the other questions, you know, like, okay, like, but now what's it like, you know, working with these people, or, you know, like, I wonder what else is out there,
Oh yeah.
you
Is
know.
that
And
something you think about every now and then, or are you just so preoccupied with the growth process? You're just like a la 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 la.
I mean, I'm always I'm always sort of caught up with you know, what's next, you know. But I try to be within the moment. But
Yeah.
the thing is, it's like I'm a multifaceted sort of artist. It's like I like, sometimes I think maybe too much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to do characters, I want to do environments, I want to do 3D. You know, I want to do everything. It's like,
Yeah.
I'll be doing something, I'll go on ArtStation, I'll be like, oh wait, that looks cool, I want to try this, you know.
Yeah. Shiny
And
object syndrome. I know what that's like.
yeah, yeah, basically, that's such a good way to put it. And so yeah, you know, it's like, I think I am a designer by trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so at SIXMOREVODKA, I'm currently working more as an illustrator.
Interesting.
So it's been a complete start again, you know, almost like, because the whole game changes.
Yeah.
So, but there is a part of me that is yearning to get back into production and you know, doing concept arts and just like churning out designs and iterations and solving problems. Um, that's what I miss a lot, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's something thrilling about the production, and like, you know, sometimes not knowing what you're gonna do tomorrow. You get into the studio, they're like, "Oh, dude, like, we need some tank designs," or something came in, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we need an
You're like, yes.
environment. Or yeah,
Give
like,
it to me.
okay, cool,
Yeah.
okay, cool,
I mean, you
let's
know, I'll
go.
do it. Whatever. It's cool. No one else is going to touch it.
Yeah. And like also like the freedom. So at the concept art studio, it's one of those things where they don't care about your process. They just want you to deliver at the end of the day. So it also gave me an environment to explore and change and uh, evolve my process efficiency, try new tools, see what works um, in a system like Six More Vodka. But this is also part of the pros because they have to be consistent within uh, the quality of work that comes out of the studio, and you have to have that same uh, quality across the board and style from a studio of like 12 artists. So
it's amazing. It's honestly amazing. From the outside, I don't know who does the work until I see the names.
Yeah. I mean,
That's amazing.
so yeah, it's like there's a lot of crossover into like we need to have these checkpoints, and the process sometimes is not negotiable.
Yeah, that's actually interesting for me because as an artist, you going there and me seeing your work on Instagram, your own kind of work and the stuff you love to do on your own time, you have such a strong distinctive style. Everybody kind of knows you for it. You're kind of a little bit famous around for it, and
no.
it's kind of interesting to know that even someone who has such a strong style, once they get into a studio, they kind of get beaten with the style hammer, and they just said like, "Hey, adapt to this." Do you think like there's something to being able to adapt to a style that is useful as a concept artist moving into this business?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? I never thought of myself as having a style.
Yeah,
it's nice that people recognize my work when I do it, but also if you really like look at my stuff, it jumps. It's all over the show, and so I think adapting, like unless you like, okay, I want to work at Blizzard, that's all I want to do, and if you want to be like a bit more organic, so let's say you work at an outsourcing studio. Today you're working on a realistic project, tomorrow you might be working on a stylized project.
Yeah.
So again, like if you can adapt, I think it's just a far more valuable thing to do.
Yeah.
If you specialize in a style, then you have to really specialize in it.
Yeah.
To be valuable.
You could actually just even go completely independent if your style is strong enough. Just your fan base just becomes rabid.
Right. And so you see that like quite often now with like things like Patreon and stuff, and people and there's definitely people who are far more successful at it than others, so like I think the more authentic, the more fresh people generally like dominate that market quite a bit.
And the hentai artists?
Oh, yeah. I mean, sex sells, but
exactly. I was going to say, like, if you look around at the Patreon stuff, it's like what is being sold, typically speaking, is what people want. And that's kind of says a lot.
I mean, that's another thing, it's like people saw the Patreon ship and just jumped on board, but they never asked the questions. Like, a lot of the people that are successful, it's like supply and demand, right? Yeah. And then you have people that they might be great artists, but their subject matter is not really mainstream. So then they suffer, they putting out content for like, 10 fans.
Do you think these guys like at the end of a workday just like question their existence?
well I've seen it. Maybe in the sense where like, it takes a personal toll, like, the mental game of art. It's like, what am I doing wrong? Is my art not good enough? Or and sometimes those questions are valid, and I think introspection is really great.
Interesting.
But it's like, sometimes it's very hard to really think to yourself like, okay, maybe people don't want to see this stuff, but this stuff is not sellable. So if you're doing something like obscure and it's just like very, very niche, it's very hard to function very highly on those platforms
Yeah.
that basically thrive on numbers.
Yeah.
You know, so
Wouldn't you say the same is true for working in-house or working for a studio remotely, is that you can't just produce everything that you think is cool, because you might find a niche within the industry who does think that thing you're producing is cool. But if you're applying to just random studios or whatever, people are going to look at your work and go like, well, I don't know if I'm into, you know, specifically horror type art or, you know, bubblegum worlds or whatever. They might objectively say you have the skill, but the subject matter is so far from what we can do. Your designs aren't grounded. Like, how can we use you?
right. I think there is definitely a thing like artist for artists
Yes.
and artist for the mainstream or an audience.
Yeah.
Right. So there are artists who I think are phenomenal, but they're not really appreciated by the mainstream. Their stuff is like very like fresh, but they're so far removed, like people can't relate or they can't grasp it. And so it just helps that for a lot of people that maybe their personal tastes overlap with a mainstream taste,
Yeah.
or a sellable taste.
Yeah.
That really plays into their strengths. So I did have the one situation where it was like, we like your stuff, we don't know how to place you. Because they were like, we have like multiple projects, but none of the work that you do sort of fits in line with those. And so we'll keep you on file, and if a project comes up that, you know, requires the style, you know, we'll get back to you. And so that's the also the risk of you know, just being slightly different, or
I mean, at the end of the day,
I like to explore.
Asking like, what is the commercial viability of my work if I'm trying to break in, I think becomes a pretty important question. I wanted to know, like, how did you get noticed by SIXMOREVODKA?
So I don't know if you know about IFCC.
Yeah.
But I guess for the people that don't know, it's a art convention that happens in Croatia every year. And so basically they invite quite a few industry leaders, and they host a range of talks and workshops throughout the week. And so it's Monday to Friday. Lectures are normally like from 10 to 6. And then after 6 p.m., it's basically like a social networking thing. So there's like an unspoken etiquette of like, you know, put your portfolios away, put your books away. Now we like actually connecting as people and
drinking beer.
Yeah. And so actually I saw that Marco was going, our boss, Marco Đorđević. And so I sent him a message like, hey, you know, will be awesome to meet you. And then I think he went and just looked at the work, and he was like, dude, like, really dig the stuff. Yes, let's meet.
Oh, wow.
And then so went there, and then so they have like portfolio reviews, but they use it as well as for recruitment. So if there's anyone that's like, you know, shows serious potential, they'll keep in contact and possibly get an art test or something.
Yeah.
And so met with them, went well, and then got the art test. So
that's amazing. Like, when you say it went well, was there like any scrutiny on your work in that moment?
So I mean, it was a weird one because he had seen my work already. So I gave him my portfolio, and he asked you some really intense questions. But I don't want to say the questions for like any like future things. Like,
spoiler alert, guys.
If you're not prepared for it, it kind of just, I think that's the point. It's just to put you on the spot.
Okay.
And then how you deal with that is also part of it. But then he looked at my portfolio and he's like, no, man, I already saw the work. So then I just basically got the hot seat. And then he was like, yeah, dude, I dig it. And then called over the producer and was like, we're going to give this guy an art test. And then I sat down with the producer and then spoke logistics. And then
so you came home, did the art test, sent it through, And then what? Did you get an email back and it was like, well,
Yeah, so they have quite an extensive evaluation process, and they also do the interview process a little bit like they do it reverse from what I've seen from other companies, which I
oh yeah.
also like.
Mm-hmm.
So normally you'll have the verbal interview with the company,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll get the art test.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you apply to Sixma Vodka, they give you the art test first,
Okay.
because the idea is if you can't do the work, then there's no need to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting place where work is king.
Yeah. And so was that art test quite open, or did they say specifically we want you to do it in a particular style or something like that?
So it is very specific. There's three parts. It's like three very specific assignments, and then so they're testing very specific skills
Yes.
to see
I love that.
how
That's
you
cool.
function.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess they have like time constraints, and you should always stick to those time constraints, because the urge to like, maybe I'll just spend a little bit more time. But if you get to the office and then you set false expectations,
Yeah.
you're kind of screwed. So
yeah, be honest. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's another
in this
thing.
industry.
It's like yeah, that's another thing, just managing expectations of people and clients, and is really important. So it's like, people getting the worst thing is interviewing people. When I used to interview, and then it's like, okay, how long did this take you? And then so you get two types of people, like, or three, right? So people that know their time and how fast they work, and the other people that, like, I don't know. And then the other people who lie.
Overpromise, under deliver.
Yeah, and then you get them into the studio because you're like, okay, cool, like this guy can like
smash out 10 designs in an hour.
Like, wait, like what happened, dude? Like, you said the stuff took you like a couple of hours. It's been 2 weeks. Like, where's the work?
Yeah, I've been in an art director position where I've hired some people and we gave them a chance based on the quality of their portfolio without necessarily sending a strict art test first. We sent them a test, but when that test came back, the expectation was like we were expecting these people to demonstrate what we saw in their portfolio. And when they didn't hit the bar, it was really disappointing for everybody involved, because it was like we all looked up to this artist or something like that. And it's like they're just not hitting it. And you're like, what went wrong? Like, I thought, what's going on? And then like everybody has to take a step back in the studio and say, like, I don't know if this is going to work, because it could cost us.
Yeah. So I mean that's why you also have like probation periods, right?
Yeah.
So it's just to really see if things are working out and the synergy, and because that's the other thing. You can have a really great artist, but they're not a fit for the culture that's part of the company. Maybe attitude wise it's just not up to par. They bring negativity. There's a whole sort of things that can
hygiene,
be deal breakers. Hygiene, not being a team player.
Yeah.
All of these things are deal breakers.
It's like dating.
I'd rather
guys.
work with. Is it like dating? I wouldn't. Yeah, maybe a little. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. So tell me, like, I want to know, like, how has your view of the entertainment industry changed since you've left South Africa?
Oh, that's a hard one, man. Is there any way to bring that?
Okay, so
slightly more
big
specific?
Fish, small pond. What's it like being a fish in a big pond? How has that changed the way you've thought about things? Do you feel it? Do you feel like you're a fish in a big pond? Because I mean, even at the studio you're at now, you're working with so many more artists than maybe you were used to back home in a smaller studio. Like, what is that even like? Is it like, it's a different vibe, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you go from, a key player to to an artist, right? And it's like, you know, if something happens, you know, it's not really a big loss. And it's like, you know, it's now you back into like the middle of the pack sort of fighting. So you have to stay relevant, you have to stay growing. The industry just moves way too quickly. You know, just watching how these guys grow, you know. So at the time that I applied, and probably if someone applies now, they're going to be evaluated differently because the studio is growing as well as a whole.
And has
so
different needs.
Yeah. So it's just very interesting. Like back home, things were very slow. A lot of things don't move as quickly. Yeah, being in Berlin, like we friends with a lot of people in different studios, right? And we seen people come in and come out, you know, coming from across the world, and then just not being successful, and then they have to go back. You know, they basically uprooted their whole lives to come to Berlin, you know, and then things don't work out.
Yeah. And is that a humbling experience for you? Do you feel like you're constantly on the edge of just sharpening your axe?
Well, yeah. It's like there's no room for complacency, right? And that excites me. It has the level of stress, so I do need to manage that a little bit more.
Yeah, because that is in the past, maybe your growth was determined by yourself. Now your growth is determined by the pressure of your environment. Like it's almost as if you're stepping into a place that has less oxygen, and so you have to breathe harder. And I'm wondering, like, if you're at that level, like, I wonder the guys at the top of the studio, like, how are they training? Like, how do they even step outside of their own comfort zones, right? Do you ever observe something like that when you see them painting or something or chatting about it?
So I think one thing to mention as well, right? So I think, you know, once I started learning, things became there's a steep learning curve at the start, but the more you progress, learning itself is a skill. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. So now for me to pick up ideas or concepts around processes or around art and different kinds of skills is a lot easier and a lot quicker. You know, like I can watch a video of someone doing something in Photoshop and sort of be like, oh, okay, that's how he does it. You know, I don't need someone to be like, oh, hey, I done this because of this and this, like, you know. So I think it gets progressively easier to pick up stuff. And so I think these guys are just at the level where you know, they constantly learning, but for them to grasp new skills is just that much easier.
Okay,
you know.
Interesting. I've always likened it to when you're just starting out, it's really hard to propel yourself out of the atmosphere of the earth because you have so much gravity. But the moment you start to ascend and get into the atmosphere, that gravity has less effect on you, and you start to have clearer vision. Your body and mind is fitter. Like you're used to the training. And I often say the word training because in many ways, don't you find that being in an industry where you are demanded to have a high caliber quality to your art, you are essentially like an athlete?
Right. And I like the word training, and because I think a lot of people don't think of it that way. So, you know, like I like to liken it to weightlifting. You know, it's like you have to start off gradually, and it's something that people understand. If they see someone jacked, they know this guy's been working hard. You know,
he's been through the pain.
Whereas they see someone like you and they see like your art, it's very hard for them to gauge the struggle. You know, I always say like I think it was Michelangelo, but it was like something like if you knew how much I suffered for my mastery, you wouldn't think it's mastery at all. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and I think that's something that I would like to keep doing, is just like showing the journey. and letting people know it takes time and it takes effort and it's a struggle, but it's anyone can do it if they really want to do it.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I've seen too many people just give up just before the cusp.
Of leveling up.
Yeah, you know, because and I get it, it is difficult, but if you lose the mental battle, it's very difficult to recover.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think training is a good word to use.
Yeah, man. What's interesting about that is that someone who's young or a student looking at a professional person's portfolio or even their professional work, they see this high caliber artwork and they can't really gauge or have some kind of measure in terms of, like, number one, how they got there, number two, how long it took them to get there. And often they just see like, oh, my skills are just around the corner from that. And there's a huge disconnect in terms of like realizing where you actually are versus where you need to be. Did you find that when you were starting out, when you were like looking at this work and you thought like, oh man, I should get this in about a year, and you found it took like 2?
I mean, that's still my struggle until today. You know, it's like I've been trying to like pick up 3D a little bit more in depth now. You know, and you've seen a lot more. The tools are getting far crazier.
Amazing, eh?
And yeah, kind of.
I just jumped on the Blender bandwagon because it's just too sexy to ignore.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on Blender now, and it's like, it just, man, it's hard to think about, because I don't really think about it like that, because I know that'll just bum me out.
It's like, don't think of the journey, just focus on every single step.
Yeah, I mean, like, focus on your own journey, right? So it's like, it's like, instead of saying like, okay, I'll get there in this amount of time, it's like, I'll get there, you know. And it sort of just keeps me tracking. And because I thought like I was gonna come to SMV and just like, you know, be a rock star, and I was like, no. So and trying to grasp the people's journeys here is really difficult. You know,
personal journeys.
There's a lot of people from different backgrounds, so, you know, but like we still ended up at the same point.
Yes. And
so it makes it even harder to gauge their journeys, because I'm like, wait, but how did this get to this? And, you know, it gets quite tricky.
Fellow travelers.
Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And you realize like how your path, as similar as it might be right now to those people around you, it could slingshot in a completely different way.
I mean, so this was also part of my thing. Like, I had like goals, right? And I used to make like 5-year goals, and almost every year I got derailed, you know, at an opportunity that I didn't think about at all, that just came out from nowhere. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Say yes.
So it's like, I stopped setting 5-year goals. I started setting like just sort of skill goals, you know, so just for my own development. And I'm like, the rest of it, like career wise, I'm sort of just like, let's see how this goes, you know.
Absolutely. So as many artists who are aspiring to break in, a lot of the time, if they don't have anything to lean on, and I often call this leverage, sometimes people are in a different job and they're spending the money they earn at that job to train in art, but there are people who just go straight into art. And I think that nowadays, because it's so hard and so competitive to break in, I often ask people like, what is your leverage, and can you create leverage to actually break in? Because it might take a little bit longer than you think. And I mean, hearing your story now, it's like, what do you think of that?
I mean, so can they create leverage?
Well, I'm just thinking that, you know, like, for example, like everyone is so preoccupied with being an artist and breaking in and covering the Maslow pyramid of needs and making sure you have a roof over your head and money in your pocket and everything, like where does happiness fit on this journey for you specifically?
For me, I'll tell you when I find it. No, look, I think the one thing that does help me is that I'm happiest when I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it doesn't matter what, as long as it's challenging. So the grind and everything is exciting and awesome to me, you know. So if we just talking just work-wise, and it's very hard for me to sometimes relate and sometimes empathize with people about, you know, their struggles about like not being able to put in hours, because I've never had to ask myself that question.
Yeah, it's been it's a completely personal journey as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I try to understand and try to speak to people, but it is like something, you know, people always told me, oh, but you need a balance, and I'm like, but this for me is balanced, you know. Like it's slightly offset towards like creating, so work and then personal art, and then a little bit of social. You know, if I go 50-50, I find that when I am trying to be social, my head is in art. I'm super restless. You know, I can't focus on conversation. So I found my personal balance, but my personal balance that helps me find some sort of enjoyment and fulfillment and sustainable is not that way for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, so, everybody has to figure that out, that personal balance of work life and all of that. I mean, what do you even think about, you know, being in a serious relationship while trying to level up or, you know, set yourself up in a foreign country?
Well, I'm in a relationship now, and you know, I think once we move in together and start progressing, then like I think time management will become like, you know, one of the things we'll have to deal with at some point and compromise.
Yeah, find time.
But then it's like, you know, I think you need to be fair to your partner as well.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to compromise and participate, then maybe it's the wrong time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think anyone should suffer for your personal journey.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And while you were trying to like break in and travel and do all these extravagant, amazing things with your career, were you even thinking about being in relationships, or were you in relationships?
No. I really got lucky. I met her at IFCC. And then, yeah, we were friends for a year. And then I went over again. And then we sort of got together there. And then just so happened that I moved. I was already living here, and she's in Switzerland. So it kind of just, everything sort of just worked out for us. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. If you look in it, it's just harder to actually find it.
Yeah.
Oh.
But you know, Europe is a small place. So, you know, it's just around the corner.
Yeah.
It's not like Africa, you know. The giant continent.
Like that would be so crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like trying to have that. And
so I wanted to wrap up our interview today by asking you the same thing I ask all my interviews at the end of a conversation,
no.
which is, which would you rather be? No. So I was going to ask you, based on your own experience, do you have any recommended advice for young artists who want to break into this industry today?
I mean, I mean, it might sound corny, but, you know, be patient, persevere, and be consistent. I think those three things will get you further than anything, you know, like fundamentals or motivation and all of those things. You know, it's like quality and all of those things come with time. and people just need to be able to make it to that point. And so, you know, before I even talk to anyone about fundamentals, I'd rather first get them into good habits of just, you know, creating every day.
Yeah.
You know, creating good habits, sustainable habits.
Yeah.
And then once you get that, then, you know, it's a lot easier to figure out everything else.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Right, I really appreciate that. So for anyone who's watching this, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing so much with us. I feel like we dug in deep and we managed to get some really amazing information out of you.
I hope so.
Yeah, so next time I'm in Berlin, I'm gonna have to buy you a beer, right? Does that sound good?
Yeah, dude. Come on through. It'll be fun. Yeah,
Awesome,
thanks
dude.
for having me, man.
You're so welcome. Have an awesome evening. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.